today we are focusing on the mastering of the HSC verbs with Adriel here to give us his wisdom. Hello, Adriel.
Hello, Bill. Hello, Bill. Sounds like an old man there. Wisdom.
Yeah. Well,
uh,
you have lots and lots of
uh,
wisdom. Don't
thank
don't
you,
uh,
thank you.
discount yourself. Yeah. Before we get into our HSC key verbs episode, which I'm really excited for listeners to hear, we're going to do our lit or quit for today. All right, you ready? You ready?
Yeah, sounds good.
Okay.
Sounds good.
Lit or quit, turning band descriptors into a classroom chant to hype students for band sixes. Lit or quit.
Uh,
This is a funny one. Yeah.
yeah. Look, I'm normally not like a great showman, but I think for the sake of the lols or the laughs, I think this would be a
Mm-hmm.
cool way to hype the kids up. We want band fives and sixes 100%, so I'm gonna say lit. I think
Totally.
that's cool.
Oh,
So, what I would challenge people to do is, if you can pop in the comments, what are some of the chants that you would actually create or develop in order to get your classroom lit? I would love to hear them. Send us some messages or whatever. I think it's definitely lit. I'll see if I can do it for
yeah.
my own classroom as well, and we'll see how it
Oh,
goes.
please do. Yes.
Whether I get
Test
that
it.
funny sort of whether I get that funny sort of "So you're old, just be quiet," or stop trying to do
I know.
this.
They'll be like, this
Uh,
is so lame. That is so
yeah,
funny. But they won't
I
use the
think that
word lame. They'll use some other slang word of theirs that we're too old to understand now.
yeah, that's true. That's true. I think so. But I think also it's probably a nice segue into getting the kids to think about their band descriptors
Mm.
and really just hype them. It shows your energy, your passion. So I definitely think it is lit. So yeah, it's
Yeah.
a good lit one.
I love that. I love that. I agree. I think this is so lit. I can see them cringing but laughing, but that's like you said, that's what's memorable, right? And as
Yeah,
much I
yeah,
think as they'd be like, "Oh, this is weird," that deep down they'll love it. They'll be like, "This is
yeah,
actually really helpful. This is really good."
yeah.
I you just made me think about my high school history teacher, and she always used to come up with like little acronyms. Like she had this acronym to help us remember who the Allied forces and who the Axis forces were in World War II. I might not say it; it's a little bit tongue in cheek. However, to this day, like, you know,
Still remember it.
Miss Bartha, you're not an English teacher, but if you ever happen to listen, to this day I remember it, and I thank you for your laughs and because it was brilliant. Yeah, I still remember it. So
Yeah,
why not classroom chant to hype up the band six HSC verbs, and one that
yeah,
they remember decades as adults as well. Like, why
yeah,
not? I think that's
yeah.
fabulous. It's definitely
Extra
a lit
extra
on mine.
points. I think extra points for teachers that can have their students chanting it through the school hallways and whatnot as well. Um,
That's so funny. Make it a bit of a game.
yeah,
I love it. I
yeah.
love it. That's so good.
Oh,
Well,
oh,
we'll put this up. We'll
gosh.
definitely put this on our socials.
Yeah,
Angel has issued you all a challenge. I know that there would be many competitive English teachers out there. So, yeah, please engage. Not only would be keen to hear because it would be so helpful, but it would also be very hilarious. And uh,
yeah.
in the rush of this job, it's good to have these things that we laugh and give us that joy. So that's awesome.
Mm,
Thank
mm.
you, Adriel. Well, all right, we might get into our episode for today. So if you were listening with us last week, you would note that we discussed in great depth, thank you, Adriel, the HSC band descriptors, particularly for advanced. And kind of adding on to that, we're going to be looking this week at the HSC verbs because a lot of those are used within the band descriptors, and
Mm,
obviously, the verbiage that the students would use or engage with might also determine where that band fits. So it's a
yeah,
nice correlation and super helpful because it's not just English teachers that use these HSC verbs, is it? They're the HSC verbs for a reason. They're cross
mm,
KLA.
mm,
Obviously, we will discuss it with a bit more of an English leaning. However, a lot of what we discussed today could be used for any of your KLAs. So I know we've
yeah,
got a few teachers from different KLAs listening. I know we've got some PE teachers, some history teachers, some legal teachers. So the more the merrier. We love that, we've got all sorts of teachers listening to us. It makes us so happy. And
Yeah.
yeah, we just hope that this is going to be really, really helpful for everyone.
Mm, mm.
Hmm. We might get into it then, Adriel. What do you think? Get into our first
Sounds good.
question?
Sounds
All
good.
right. So, the first thing that our listeners, I think, would love to hear is how can students utilize the HSC glossary of the key verbs, and how can they use them to interpret the requirements of the writing tasks within English, and maybe even more specifically, how they're used in the English examinations?
Yeah. Okay, cool. So I guess a good starting point here, and I've been focusing a little bit more on this defining of the key verbs because it's sort of like your foundational elements for students. So
Hmm.
really just type it in on the Google interwebs, internet there.
Hmm.
Type in your HSC NESA key verbs and you'll come up the first link there, which is the glossary of keywords that NESA does provide for us. And we have words like analyze, evaluate, synthesize, which will probably be our primary focus for today. But what this little document or this little uh, website does for us is it helps the students to decode some of those HSC writing tasks and verbs, sorry, within the tasks that they need to sort of familiarize themselves with.
Hmm.
Because a lot of the
Hmm.
questions that they will have will allow them to align their responses with respective band descriptors. Whether we're working towards that basic sound based response, which might fall into that 3 to 4 band range, to then we get
Hmm.
into more of those effective, sophisticated responses in the band 5 and 6 ranges there. So the purpose of the glossary here, I guess the number one purpose is it clarifies what these verbs actually mean. Okay, so for
Hmm.
example, I know at the beginning of each module that we teach in senior English, you'll get the students to work through the rubric statements there, and you'll come across these verbs like analyze, evaluate, describe, identify. Like these are the different verbs you'll come across. Now, I've been doing this in recent years where you'll ask the students, well, what does it mean to identify? Or what does it mean to explain? What does it mean to
Hmm.
analyze? What does it mean to evaluate? And more often than not, you get radio silence because,
Hmm.
first of all, students might not want to actually respond to the question. But second of all, they actually don't have a very good explicit understanding of these verbs. And I think it's significant because you'll often find this in your first or second paragraph of the rubric that students have to understand these verbs to build off of. These are the questions that they will get. And if they don't understand these verbs, well, they're not going to be going anywhere when it comes to their examinations or their assessment tasks. So
Yeah.
what we do is we look at verbs. So, for example, if you look at identify, students will be saying things like, "Yeah, to identify means to maybe point something out." Now, that's very
Hmm.
surface level. That's literal, and you align that maybe with your basic band descriptor there. Yeah.
Yeah.
And as you start to move on, we're looking at words like analyze, which means we're requiring them to look at the examination of techniques, while synthesize maybe demands them to look at integrate the integration of their ideas. So
Hmm.
what we're looking at here is we're really aligning some of these verbs and with those band descriptors, and if they have this understanding as a base, then you're setting them up for success. We're giving them a solid foundation to then hopefully take off on.
Yeah.
Whereas if they don't have this, then it's a bit sort of like wishy washy. They'll be umming and ahhing their way through the entirety of the course because they're not certain of, or they don't have that surety of what are the verbs? What are the things that I actually have to do? And I think it's very
Mm.
important. So when looking at this glossary, we want to make sure we're utilizing correctly as well. So get them to define it. The glossary on the website will have definitions, but get your students to write their own definitions in their books. I think
Mm.
that's very important
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
students can have that tendency to misinterpret the verbs as well. So they might describe instead of analyzing for some questions, which is what we generally
Yeah.
see when it comes to their identification of techniques. So they can identify well and they might describe or explain very simply what a technique does, but they don't know how to analyze its purpose, its effect, its relation to the
Yeah.
question, how context
Yeah.
influences it. Like these are the different things that we want our kids to start to see. Um,
Mhm.
then we move into sort of, I guess, breaking these down. We're going to go through some of the meanings as we move forward here, but really, I think the fundamental thing is get them to familiarize themselves with the language of this glossary, because it
Yeah.
sets the foundation for them to actually build off of. It's one of those
Yeah.
key elements. If we're looking at like the analogy of building a house, this is your foundation. This is the laying of the foundation, where
Mm.
if they can understand what they are required to do, a verb being a doing word, then they have more clarity, they have more direction, and I think it's
Yeah.
very significant that we get them to consider this.
No, I think that's perfect. I think that idea of that they have clarity of what they have to do, because it guides them into the depth that they need to be taking and how they need to be responding. And the
Mm,
thing that stands out to me is particularly when you're looking at the short answer section of paper one.
mm, mm,
Often those HSC verbs are used, and they determine the depth of the response, the short answer response that's needed, and it's allocated according to a mark range with that as well. I think it's good for yeah. You've made a really good point about how it
yeah,
clarifies the depth and what they need to do, and some really good strategies there. Like, there are a lot of free HSC verbs posters floating around on the internet.
yeah,
I know I've got a copy of them kind of on the running along the top of my walls in my classroom,
mm, mm,
just as a visual. But if you maybe do at the end of year 10, if you looking for some extra things to do with them, or you have a transitions unit before they start year 11, you could cover it then with your
yeah,
students and get them to start thinking about it then early in year 11. I think what we want to make sure that they understand not only what those verbs are, but what they are doing with them. We kind of don't want to be wasting time if we can avoid it in year 12.
yeah,
We want to get that done out of the way, because then they'll put this into practice with what they're doing in year 11 English. Many of us do a prelim exam, so I
yeah,
think, yeah, the earlier the better, and it's a nice symmetry across all the KLAs as well.
yeah,
All right, that
yeah.
was
I,
really
li-
great
I
though.
like I like that
Mm,
you mentioned just then, like, it's across KLA. These are the verbs that you'll use across all of your KLAs. So this is what I often tell my students in terms of their writing strategies. Making sure that you understand this will not only align you with a good foundation for English, but all your subjects. You
yeah.
really do need to put this as one of the first things. Like, I'll get them to write the definitions out over and over again across the term as well. And you might do little 5-minute activities as silent starters, or your do now activities, whatever you do at the beginning of your lessons. I'd encourage you to actually maybe focus in on one verb, and get them to, maybe, for example, if we're targeting the verb analyze at the beginning of a lesson, well, put an
Mm,
analytical question up there, and get them in five
mm,
minutes what can you do, and see if they build and build and build. And if they're making the same mistake over and over again, you're using this as a diagnosis tool to sort of, okay, well, how can I then go on and teach them analysis in a different way? What are the different
yeah,
ways you reach out to,
yeah.
what's working within your faculty, what is working with teachers across the state, maybe if you're part of like statewide
Mm,
programs, and really
mm-hmm.
try and implement a few of these different strategies to get them to understand these. Because if you don't have the right foundations, which is what I'm finding actually in my teaching, this is like 10 years now, I'm finding that this is probably something that I have neglected over a long time. And I think it's something which will be interesting to see how we move forward in terms of results and whatnot. But in the classroom
Mm-hmm.
alone, you're starting to see students having those light bulb moments a little bit more, because they understand what is being required of them. So
Yeah,
look, it is beneficial, it's important, and it's cross KLA. It's very
yeah.
significant to sort of highlight that.
No, it is. It really is. I love that idea of the do now, because you just reminded me. In my junior years, I often have some of these verbs in the do now questions, and you're
Yeah,
building that foundation early on, and you're letting them learn as they go. That's awesome. All
yeah,
right, we might get into kind of a second question for you then, Adriel. So, um, I want to focus on some of those higher order HSC verbs that
yeah.
our English students will hear. So verbs like analyze, evaluate, synthesize. How can they be defined across our band descriptors of basic, sound, effective, sophisticated? Like, what's the
Mm,
connection or relationship between those? And
mm.
how do their applications compare as the sophistication increases within someone's English response?
Okay. So again, these are like lesser verbs. I keep highlighting this. I keep emphasizing this, and this is how they, sort of scale in complexity across the descriptors. And you sort of
Mm,
mentioned from bands 3 to 6. So this is the performance of our students. So again, we mentioned defining these verbs across the descriptors clarifies their application, and you'll see this in the marking criterias. You'll see this if you're looking at past HSC papers for English, where at the beginning of the paper it says you will be marked on or assessed on, and you'll see these verbs littered across certain
mm,
dot points there. So it's very important for us to consider. So let's first look at analyze. All right. Now,
okay.
if we're breaking down this idea of analysis, this is examining how parts. So, for example, techniques in English contribute to meaning. Okay,
Mm,
how, that key word there is like the hows and the whys. If we're moving into these higher order verbs like your analyze and your evaluate, we're looking at the hows and the whys. So continue to ask your kids these questions. These are things that we learn in primary school, the who, what, where, when, why questions. So
yeah.
for analysis, we're looking at the how these techniques help to construct or contribute towards the meaning. Now, you can analyze in a band 3 to 4 range where students will maybe identify the technique, but they don't provide that explanation.
Mm,
An example, this might be something like the text has metaphors. Cool. And
yeah.
how are they? Like these are the questions that we're sort of been asking. And you probably find your
Mhm.
students will start off there. It's not a bad point, like to highlight here. If you do your first writing activity and your students start here, don't don't cry. I would say
Yeah,
it's a good starting point because then it's like you know
yeah.
where you need to build from. All right, and we can start to
Yeah, it's a
model.
good little form assessment sort of thing, like a
Yeah,
tool.
that's right. That's right, and we can model it from there. If we move on to like that sound sort of response, this is when they might describe the techniques used. So
Yeah,
they
yeah.
might suggest something like metaphors show the character's feelings in
Mhm,
module A,
mhm.
and it's very general. It's very sort of surface level, very basic. And see,
Yeah,
students will get that and they'll think, oh, look, I'm actually explaining the technique. I've used it in my peel paragraph or my pedal paragraph,
yeah,
but it's
yeah,
very
that's true.
basic. It's very
Yeah,
sound, like we
yeah.
want to we want to get students out of this level here. So what we're looking at in that band 3 to 4 range is the application here is a lot of the times it's either descriptive, so it lacks that purpose or impact, or they explain but they lack that depth, which means it remains in that sound band descriptor. Now, if we move towards that band 5 and 6 response, what we're looking at here is this is where students in the band 5 range, if we start off with, they're examining the technique's impact and it's clear. So, an example
Mhm,
of this might be we're going on that metaphor technique there.
mhm.
Metaphors effectively analyze identity's complexity in Module A's intertextual framework. So, see where we're
Mhm.
giving it like a purpose and we're looking at its impact clearly. So
Yeah,
there's a clear module aligned analysis with this, and this meets that band 5 sort of developed standard, which is,
yeah.
or that effective standard, which is what is generally associated with the band
Right.
5 descriptor.
As
Uh,
opposed to, like, just the text in a vacuum sort of a thing?
exactly right. Where we're relating
Okay.
it now to our module. And
Mhm,
then if we're looking at this level of sophistication with the band 6, this is probably for our higher order students. What we're doing is we're looking at how it integrates those nuanced insights. And we sort of mentioned this last episode where we're seeing that personal informed response in that nuanced manner. And this might
mhm.
be referenced here, for example. And you could have each of these examples up on the board or on a piece of paper, and you can actually highlight how they differ. You can get the students to identify. So, for example, here
Good
now,
idea.
if I'm looking at more of a sophisticated response, I might say something like metaphors sophisticatedly analyze identity social tensions, insightfully reflecting Module A's intertextual dialogue. Now, again, that's a bit clunky for me. This is just an example.
Mhm,
I'm sort of
mhm.
coming off with the top of my head, but
It's useful. Yeah, yeah, it's useful for
yeah,
sure.
like we are now looking at the ideas being synthesized with a bit more clarity. It's got that nuance to it, and this will allow for that insightful depth when it goes into your exploration of the idea and how it sort of manifests itself.
Mhm.
through your text, how you're responding to the question. So that's that analysis sort of verb, or how we analyze. Yeah, look, there's so much more we can say about it, and we'll try and break it down further, maybe in a few little sound bites that we do afterwards. But that's the basic sort of way I'd
Yeah.
look at it. And then we can
Yeah.
move on to like a verb like evaluate. Now, evaluate is where we assess the value or significance of. So we're justifying something, we're making a claim, we're justifying something, and it's supported by evidence. So, for example, those band 3 and 4 responses will again be very simple. So, a band 3 response might just state an opinion, where they might say, "Yeah, the text." They might just reword the question. Yes, the text is good.
Mm.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Like, how?
Yeah.
Why? Those are the
Yeah.
questions, you know. Um, the band 4 response might have a very simple explanation, where they might say, "These techniques or the text techniques are important for the module's
Mhm.
purpose." Okay.
Mhm.
Again, how and why. It's more descriptive. It lacks that critical assessment that's required. And then we move into like the band 5 and 6 sort of responses here, where the band 5 responses will effectively evaluate something again. So they'll assess the value clearly. An example using, say, irony as a technique here. So it says the text irony effectively evaluates human experiences, aligning with the
Mhm.
common module. So again, we're aligning it
Mhm.
with the common module here. And then to
Mhm.
critically assess with nuance, again, we'll say something along the lines of, and this is for your sophisticated sort of responses, the text irony evaluates universal human dilemmas, insightfully
Mm.
affirming the common module's relevance. So you can see there's a
Mhm.
few little things that distinguish the band 5 and 6 sort of
Yeah.
responses there.
That
Um,
make big
which,
impact. Yeah.
yeah, that's right, bigger impact. And then we can look at maybe the synthesis of these ideas. I know we're spending a little bit of time going over these verbs, but again, it's foundational.
No, this is really
Remember,
helpful. Yeah, for sure.
yeah. So when you synthesize, remember we're looking at how the ideas are integrated in order to form a cohesive whole. Um, so basic or sound responses will often list ideas separately, or have very simple connections between the ideas. I think
Mhm.
we'll see the listing often occur if students do maybe like a theme or character based paragraph in a
Yeah.
analytical sort of response. However,
Mhm.
your band 5 and 6 responses will again integrate these ideas clearly for purpose. So, an example
Yeah.
for a band 5 response might be these techniques effectively synthesize the thematic concerns, developing module C's persuasive craft if we're looking at maybe a reflective form of writing. Um, or even a discursive, who knows, you know? And your sophisticated sort of level there then goes on to say something like techniques synthesize the thematic and contextual insights, insightfully reflecting module. Like we're adding these higher modality sort of verbs. I mean, I haven't even
Yeah.
mentioned this higher modality language, which is something we could also talk about in future
Mhm.
episodes. But
Yeah.
I think it's very important to look at these. And again, some of these teaching strategies here, have your verb charts, so your verbs littered across the classrooms. Get the students to constantly look at these verbs, aligning them with
Mhm.
the band descriptors. They have to
Mhm.
continually drill this in so that it has purpose for them. Look at exemplar pieces. Again, we've just used some basic sort of examples here, but you can already picture if you were to give them 4 of these responses, how would they move from that basic sound to the more sophisticated responses in the band 6? Give them those exemplars and then practice. The more you practice, the better
Yeah.
that they will get. I think through the
Yeah.
shorter writing activities.
That's so true. The exemplars really are like gold in that regard because we can do so much with it. You can emphasize so many things, and I think you've given another great strategy is you could workshop the students actually considering how they reach that band descriptor and how they reach that HSC verb within what they're doing in their sentences.
Mm,
Because I think sometimes students forget that that's the big picture, but it's all built line by line by line. So
yeah.
that's fabulous. That's fabulous. So helpful. Well, question 3 then, Adriel. So if we're considering our higher order students or students that have potential to go that higher order route, how would our verb like critically analyze, synthesize, and evaluate shape the responses of those potential students across their
mm,
modules.
mm, mm. I think we focus a lot more here on like this idea of critical sort of responses.
Mhm,
And I've
mhm,
mentioned this a little bit before. Generally, your critical responses are going to be informed by other readings. So, commentaries on the
mhm,
text depends on the lens through which you read into the
mhm.
respective study that you are moving into. So, you could have like a socio-historical context or a lens. You could have a post-colonial. You could have a postmodern lens. I would say these
Mhm,
approaches will help to inform that critical sort of analysis, and
mhm,
it gets students to really develop that informed personal response. We're seeing that they
mhm,
are developing that voice that is required to have that nuanced sophistication when it comes to your higher responses. So, what does it mean to, for example, critically analyze something? Well, this is examining those techniques and ideas with what we say is a critical judgment. Okay.
mhm.
Um, it's very significant. So if we just run through like each of our modules in English, if you're looking at like, let's say the common module, module A, B. So the common module here is a human experiences module. And this, shapes responses by dissecting how techniques reveal some of those universal truths.
Yeah.
Um, that is, how we would look at forming that critical judgment in this unit. For Module A, which is your textual conversations in the advanced course, this requires comparing text, so looking at those intertextual links critically. Very, very
Mhm,
important.
mhm,
Module
mhm.
B, critical study. So this here demands deep technique scrutiny for textual
Yeah.
integrity and some of those words that we sort of see littered in the rubric itself.
Yeah,
And then
that
Module C
textual
as well.
integrity.
Yeah, yeah. What you see as well, this is very important because often we can look at this as more of like creative, more free thought sort of idea, but we still need to be critical. So this focuses on evaluating authorial choices when it comes to the reflective components, but also
Yeah,
evaluating it when we're actually studying the text, because these are the
yeah.
things that students are going to be implementing in their own writing. This is why we call it the craft of
Mhm.
writing. It's very, very
Yeah,
important. So,
like
what
without that
what
sorry, like
yeah.
without that
No, you're
ability
right.
to critically analyze, they might not be able to see the finesse in that style and therefore use that in their toolkit.
Yeah, yeah, I think so. And what we're doing is we're challenging assumptions. We're looking at like our preconceived
Mhm.
ideas. We're maybe affirming like some of these verbs that we see in the common module. You're probably
Yeah.
hearing them ring out.
Yeah.
But
Mhm.
this is what we're doing by developing that insight. We're not just looking at surface level. We're actually getting students to engage with the text, which is very significant. We've covered synthesize, that word, before. And again, this is integrating ideas for a cohesive argument.
Mhm.
And we're providing like those holistic insights. We're providing, you know, through
Conceptual.
our writing, yeah, conceptual lenses, how ideas can traverse across different paradigms, how they can traverse across different contexts. I think that's very significant for us to consider. And also
Yeah.
like these words like evaluate. I think we've covered it already, but it's assessing the significance with evidence. And it's very important to actually note this when you're looking at textual evidence, when we're justifying our responses in this verb, the evaluation, you are using evidence that is specific for your point. It's not just random
Yeah.
quotes here or there. You are
Yeah.
integrating your quotes seamlessly into your response in order to actually solidify your arguments. And I think that is
Yeah.
significant,
Yeah. This is
because
where we
when
keep sorry, you finish.
yeah, because when you do this, what you're looking at is you're getting not only a synthesized cohesive argument, but in doing so, your students will be developing that personal informed voice, which is really required of when we're looking at those band 5 and 6 responses in all
Yeah.
of these subjects, in all of these
Yes.
modules.
Yeah, that's yeah, exactly. Because people have been listening to our episodes for a while now. They know we keep harping on this idea of personal insight, student
Mm.
perspective, personal voice, and so that's where it aligns really nicely to these higher order, and that's why those students get paid at Marking Center, right? Because it
Yeah,
shines,
yeah,
it shines through. It's a
yeah,
it's a whole other level of engaging with a text and a rubric. That's
yeah,
that's
yeah.
fabulous. Thank you so much. So we've got two more questions. Age of, that's all right. So the
Yeah.
second last one, you've done a really good job at, thoroughly addressing what these different verbs are, their purpose and kind of how they relate to more specifically our English subject area and our higher order responses. So
Mm,
going off of that now, if we talk about strategies, what strategies are there that students can use to ensure that the
mm,
verbs like justify, for example, elevates their writing
mm.
to meet a more sophisticated standard within the HSC English examinations?
Mm, mm. So the word justify there requires students to provide evidence-based reasoning, and this aligns
Mm-hmm.
with Nessa's sort of idea of what an effective or sophisticated response might be. So we
Mm-hmm.
obviously have to start off with understanding the word justify. Yeah?
Mm-hmm.
If we're looking at justification in a general sort of definition, if we just type it into Google, we're looking at it as being, defending a position with evidence and reasoning. I think that's what it
Mm-hmm.
says in the Nessa glossary off the top of my head.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
and this is what we'll sort of, I would say to teachers, really highlight by providing students examples. So give them a band 3 to 4, maybe attempt at a justification, which is basic and sound. So this might state an opinion, not provide any evidence. Okay.
Yeah, not back it
Uh,
up.
yeah, that's right. And show it to them. So provide them a handout that actually highlights this. On that same handout, you'll provide a band 5 example here. This is where you'll provide clear example um, or a clear example of how it's using evidence.
Mm-hmm.
So it's effective and developed. So this could
Mm-hmm.
be, the example being the text symbolism effectively justifies identity significance in Module A's intertextual framework. Because what
Mm.
we're doing there is we're showing them how it justifies it clearly. So
Yeah,
and then ask the question, why is this a band 5 compared to the band 3 and 4?
yeah,
Really get them to
I
reflect on
love
it.
that.
Yeah,
Mm.
on the
Get
piece of
them to
paper.
understand. Yeah, don't tell them what it
Yeah,
is. Just let them
that's right.
try and work out where it fits, right?
Yeah, that's right. Like it's a think, pair, share activity. Get them to pair share.
Mm.
It's little things like this because a lot of the times I know I get caught up with this because I like to hear the sound of my own voice in the classroom sometimes when you're on a roll. But it's very
Mhm.
important to get the students to really
Yeah,
engage with what you're teaching.
yeah,
The pair shares are very significant, and I'm coming around to it a lot more now. Um, it can get tough with students missing out, lessons due to commitments and whatnot. And, you have to get through content, but
yeah,
remember, English is skills. If we're not developing the skills, the content doesn't
yeah.
matter. Um,
100%. Yeah, love that.
yeah,
So true. It's
I
so
think that's
true.
important. Yeah,
Yeah,
and then on the
and your
same piece
students
of paper
as
there,
well have fixed
yeah,
have fixed up those skills and are strong in those skills.
yeah, that's right. Then, like again, like we've got the band 5 again with the same thing. Like your band 6 here, where we're looking at sophisticated, maybe insightful um, justifications here. Offer some nuanced reasonings. All right.
Mm.
Um, this is where we're looking at the sophistication, maybe of symbolism, which justifies maybe identity's universal resonance, insightfully
Mhm,
reflecting some of the intertextual dialogue in Module A. So this
mhm.
elevates the justification into that band 6 insight. Again, you as a teacher will know how to do this. Maybe we
Yeah,
can provide some examples and some sheets for students to get them, sorry,
I
for
think
teachers to
so.
get them started.
Yeah, I
Um,
think so.
I think this is significant because I wish that I went to this earlier. It's sort of just an assumed knowledge that we have with our students, but we know as kids are coming through, we can't assume anything, and we really do need to
Yeah,
build these foundational blocks right from the beginning. So very
yeah,
significant there. I think some strategies for effective, maybe the sophisticated sort of use of justification here, the teaching strategies. What we're looking at is, you might do activities where you might provide students with a topic sentence and you get them to go out and look through the text and get them to find quotes associated with it. So give them those building
yeah,
blocks, or vice versa,
yeah,
give them evidence and say, hey, what are some topic sentences that you can develop, or give me some justifications as to what ideas are presented in these quotes that are provided. In the same vein, you're looking at reasoning depth as well. So explaining the hows and the whys
yeah,
with some of those broader sort of module implications to the concepts that are aligning in the module.
Yeah.
Looking at some of the critiques, those different ways of reading into the text in order to inform their
Mm,
reasoning as well. I think that's very,
mm,
very important, especially in
yeah.
advanced English. And then, yeah, I think polished expression. This comes with the more practice. So making sure they're using that academic language uh, for I guess that polished response there.
Yeah.
I should
Yeah.
say a little bit of a thing with that is doesn't matter if your students start off simple. This is why we encourage drafting. So as they
Yeah.
continue, then you can say, okay, you've got your idea. It's clear now. Now you can go off and polish your expression. You can embellish a little bit. Don't get them to start off with a fully embellished response. Don't expect that
Mhm.
straight away. We build on
Yeah.
that, and that's sort
Process.
of how
Yeah.
that's how they move into more of that polished sort of response. But yeah, those are a few sort of things for our higher order sort of
Hmm.
students, which
You
they can
know, those
employ.
are really, really good strategies, Adriel. And the thing too is they are higher order strategies, but you can still differentiate and scaffold them. You might not
Mm,
have, because we all have classes where we'll have a range of kids. We'll have a range of kids working at different band levels with different skills, different confidence levels. And you definitely can differentiate these activities. Like, I love that idea of,
mm,
even giving them the topic sentence. Like, that's already a differentiated activity. You've
yeah,
provided some direction with a topic sentence. And then, you could space it out. Your confident students can go find across the text. Your
yeah,
mid-range students, you might suggest a scene or a section or a chapter or a moment and direct them that way. And then
yeah,
your students that are struggling, you could provide 2, 3, 4 quotes and get them to work with that. So
yeah,
there's so many
yeah,
ways in. And what I love about your strategies, Adriel, two things. One, they're developing confidence, which
yeah,
we all know. All our students who achieve those really high results and achieve their personal best, it's because their confidence
yeah,
allows them to do that. And
yeah,
secondly, what you're sort of pointing at is that these higher leverage strategies, which I know a lot of schools, they do their rap data and they start talking about
mm,
higher leverage to get students moving across the bands. So
yeah,
all of these are fabulous suggestions. Well, we might get to
mm,
our last question. You've covered this quite thoroughly, anyway, across the discussion here. So that's been awesome. But any last kind of comments or ideas that you have for classroom activities that
yeah,
can support the English students to practice these verbs in that process of enhancing their overall
yeah,
writing? Is there
yeah.
anything else
So
maybe you haven't covered that you want to?
I'll
Yeah.
list a few different activities here that we sort of use, which
Okay.
I've already covered. So if you've got your pen and paper, if you're listening in the car, maybe come back and
Mhm.
listen to this. But they're good little things. So here, my first activity I'd suggest is like verb focus paragraph sprints. Okay, so this is where
Mhm.
they're like your short writing activities. The first one I like to do this as like a do now or a silent starter as students walk into the classroom, where
Mhm.
students write a paragraph in 5 minutes targeting one verb. I mentioned this previously, and really get them to move towards those higher band descriptors. They might start off in a band 3 to 4 range. Again, it's only 5 minutes, so you might spend 5 minutes analyzing it, get them to do a peer review, and then put another 5 minutes on the clock once they've got their 5 minutes gone there, and see if they can improve again. Whilst it's still
Mhm.
fresh.
Mhm.
I think that
Mhm.
writing practice, I keep emphasizing and harping that practice makes students better and more confident in their ability to write, especially under those time conditions. We can do text. I like this one actually. Some technique evaluation debates. All right, so you might give them a whole heap of techniques in the
Cool.
text,
Mhm.
and students can debate the effectiveness of a technique,
Mhm.
and you
That's
can set
cool.
your classroom up to do this. I think that's quite important because now we're getting them to actually look at the importance of the techniques rather than just identifying the techniques. And they will be
Yeah.
providing their nuanced sort of evaluation as to why the technique is relevant within the
Mhm.
text.
Mhm.
Um, you can get them to do the peer reviews, so with verb checklists as well. So might provide them with the checklists. They might, I just sort of mentioned this in the first activity, where they have the checklist with them, maybe as like a little um, card that might be highlighted that you put it in. Sorry, laminated that you put into your books, or might be like a question that they've popped onto their computers. But
Mhm.
they might color code, for example. This is where this student has been analyzing really well or evaluating really well. This is where it falls into that identification or a simple description or explanation. So there's
Mhm.
peer-reviewed checklists, the verb-focused ones, quite important. And you can do like workshops again with verbs. Don't be scared to go back to this. If you're finding your students are going back to like reviewing or summarizing or recounting, spend 5-10 minutes going back and saying, hey, what are these verbs that we've been going over? Because remember, our
Yeah.
students will have something go in one ear, out the other, like me sometimes. So
Mhm.
it's important for us to really consider that when it comes to this. And this can be highlighted through maybe some exemplars that you show them or bits and pieces of
Mhm.
text that do this
Mhm.
effectively. But
Mhm.
yeah, these are just a few activities. We might put a few up in some of our resources just to get our teachers off and going, up and running.
Yeah, save them a bit of
Um,
time.
yeah, that's right. Just to get you guys
Mhm.
thinking about these ideas, what works in the classroom. And again, you'll probably note a lot of my activities are short, sharp ones. All right, they're like literally nothing will go longer than 20 to 30 minutes
Mhm.
because we still want the kids to be working towards writing under time conditions, thinking on the spot, thinking very quickly because that is the that's probably one of the biggest killers for students in HSC and even trial examinations is they spend
Mhm.
so long
Timing.
just thinking about what they're writing, their timing is out of whack. Like your
Yeah.
students need to already
Yeah.
have an understanding, this base before they sit in that exam. So literally their thinking will be like 5 to 10 seconds. And most of the time is
Yeah.
writing. Writing
Yeah.
is very, very significant. So yeah, there's a few strategies there that you can use, and there are many more. Please share some with us, whatever's worked for you
Yeah, we'd
guys in the
love to
classroom,
hear.
so we can put it
Mhm.
out. Yeah,
Mhm.
but yeah, I think hopefully that
That's so good,
covers a lot.
Adrian. Oh,
Yeah.
more than covers it. I'm gonna end full circle where I called you wise in the opening and you laughed, but I think you have proven how wise you are because I mean, not only have you covered those verbs, but you have given some excellent, excellent suggestions. Like any teacher listening to this could just choose one of those and know that they go in, they do that activity, and it has made a difference to their student understanding. So that has been so fabulous. Thank you so, so
Yeah,
much.
thank you,
Thank
thank
you.
you. No, it's. I think the grey hairs are definitely starting to definitely tell. So it's good. We've learned
Mm,
quite a bit, like from our mentors, as you'll know, Bill. We've had some great ones over the years, and I think as we teach, like I keep saying this, and I've sort of emphasized this through today's episode. I'm trying new things all the time, and literally, this
yeah.
is like our yarn. We are just talking
Hmm.
about what is working for us
Hmm.
in the classroom, even now, because teaching is all about learning. I don't know. I suggested this to a few of my fellow colleagues in my current staff room, where I said, I'll go into a class sometimes and I'll just know, well, this student isn't understanding this. And literally, I will spend 15-20 minutes. I don't
Hmm.
spend the whole night like I used to thinking about, like,
Hmm.
how I would approach this. But then I go on,
Yeah.
I'll ask questions and I'll be like, well, how can I get this kid to think differently? What are some
Yeah.
strategies I can use? And then next class, I'll go in, I'll try. If it works, it works. If it doesn't, I'll go back to the drawing board. And
Yeah.
this is like the enjoyment of teaching for me, especially in
Yes.
English. I think
Yes.
we are always testing our craft. We're always changing, adapting. We're always being challenged, and I think
Yeah.
this sort of necessitates some of the verbs that we're going over in today's um, episode here. It's very significant for us to continually
Mhm.
work on our craft as well as English teachers or teachers in general. I think it's very
Yeah.
significant.
No, it is. It really is. You've offered so much, not just food for thought, but strategies. And so, on the back of that idea of strategies, what Adriel and I think we'll be doing moving forward is we might be because we know a lot of people are doing like maintenance and professional development, and you have to have your own identified hours. We might be actually doing or including the correlation to the standards, the teaching standards. That way, you're hitting two birds, one stone. You've listened to something and you might be able to use that to support your own professional development and save you some time when you're accumulating
Mm,
those hours. So yeah,
mm,
keep an eye on what we're doing because we're looking at creating like resources for these high leverage skills based strategies. Anybody who's been programming for the new English syllabus can see how heavily the skills tie into the textual concepts, and it's really about, like you said this earlier in the episode, Adriel, the content is just the vehicle really to elaborate
Yeah.
on the skills that we're trying to teach. So, rest assured, we're thinking of some things in the background that we want to be producing to help, because we know from our own experience and from mentors and all the things we've done along the way how vital they are for student confidence and development.